We're
Hey,
live.
we are as big as a surprise as always, ready to go. So I do have something before I lose my train of thought that I want to talk about. Of course, having to do with our dear Google Analytics,
Ah,
but this has a broader context. Like I'm not gonna. It isn't specifically about GA, but it's more about product development.
yeah.
So there was this. Um, thing going around LinkedIn and all sorts of forums and blog posts and everything, just kind of people losing their crap over the fact that Google Analytics decided to change the format of one of their cookies. So they changed their this kind of session cookie format. And so the big deal here is that many people have been building functionality on the session cookie. So they need that cookie to take the ID from it and feed it into their systems. And with like server to server flows where you send events from the server directly to GA, you don't really have anything else to go with except a cookie because you don't have access to client side JavaScript mechanisms, for example. So this is what's kind of bothering me. A couple of things have gone wrong here. First of all, it's Google. They have never documented the session cookie. It's not part of their official documentation. It's not an official way. They don't offer any API or any kind of SLA on how to access the session ID from the cookie. It's just not part. They don't offer that as a feature. So the session ID in the cookie should be considered kind of like an internal parameter. Google doesn't intend for the public to access it directly. They intend for people to use Google tag for that. But that's a client-side technology, so it raises the problems of server-side. But before we go to that, so that's the big problem. Google never has promised any stability for that value. They can change it on a whim, and they are absolutely entitled to do so because they don't offer that as a public service.
Yeah.
Same thing with any like constant parameters. They can change them how much they like because they want people to use Tag Assistant instead. Again, a client-side technology. So when Google decides to update something like this, kind of the big uproar in the community was, why didn't they pre-announce this? Why didn't they tell us that this value is going to change? Why didn't they give us time to adapt our systems? And Google's answer is kind of understandably that we never intended this to be a publicly consumable feature. We can do whatever we like with it because we haven't officially documented it.
Yeah.
So they were fully entitled to do this. And similarly, the community kind of using this feature, it's kind of their people's own fault for building functionality on undocumented features. It's always risky. So in that way, it's unfortunate that it was changed and so many systems broke, but you technically can't blame Google for it. However, and now we get to the part where it goes to product development. I think it's kind of inexcusable for a company that has an identifier like this, which is required in some flows, like when you want to send data to GA and you want it to be included in a session, you need a session identifier with it, that they don't offer an alternative route for getting that session ID except a client-side technology. Like, what if you want to send something from server to server without access to JavaScript? You literally have no other means except the session cookie, unless you store the session ID in your CRM or in your backend system or whatever, which is kind of actually a good way to do it. But Google doesn't recommend this in any of the documentation. So Google doesn't offer kind of a workaround for when client-side tech is not available. So in that way, like, many things just went wrong here. And this is silly, like niggling over something as insignificant as a session ID, but it paints the broader picture of having a company that has all this power and that kind of guides millions of dollars into customers' product development work that relies on these systems. And it kind of reminds me of this, I think it's an XKCD comic originally that has this like huge structure of wooden blocks that represents a system. And then there's this one little wooden block holding it all together. And then there's an arrow pointing it, something like, this is a piece of software
It's
created
like
by a Swedish
Jenga.
guy somewhere. Yeah, or like Jenga, and it's like curl or something. So in a
Yeah.
similar way, like if you have this huge system of building blocks, make sure that the little block is not an undocumented, unavailable feature or undocumented, unsupported feature. Make sure that you have like workarounds in case that changes. And for Google, you really need to like offer more robust ways. And the simplest solution, in my view, would be that they officially document this session cookie, make it an official way, and then pre-announce changes to it. They wouldn't have to change. They can still make changes how much they like, but give us like 1 month warning that this is going to change, so we have time to fix the systems. That would be the simplest way forward. So this was just kind of really bothering me. Like,
I think I've seen those conversations. Weren't them
yeah,
also on the partner forums? Because I think I am in one of those
yeah,
chains of email, and I think I've seen you there. And every time
yeah.
you write in those, I'm always like popcorn. You know, let me see how this is gonna go.
Well, I mean, my stance is because I don't really do client work anymore.
Yeah,
I don't have to pick sides, but I do feel like I understand where Google is coming from in their communication around this. Like the PMs are saying, this is not a supported feature, so don't build functionality on it. But at the same time, I do think that they need to make it a supported feature, because they've built
really,
this
people are
mechanism
using
that
it.
and they've built the system that consumes the session ID. It's
Yeah,
unfair that the only way to access it is with a technology that represents maybe like only 70% of the use cases, because then there's a lot of server-side stuff going on where you don't have access to that. So that's kind of like the product development or the product design here kind of failed, which isn't exactly new when it comes to GA4. It's not like, what? There's a problem with GA4. How is this possible?
and
It's
we
not
broke
like
our streak today because we talked
oh, we
about
did.
GA4. We haven't
Oh, okay,
mentioned
okay.
GA4 in a minute.
Well, my excuse is that this is more broadly about product design. Like, don't like
Exactly.
if 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 your customer base is making use of an undocumented feature, like we come back to this like all the time. When you design a feature, and you know all about product development, when you design a feature and you decide how it should be used, it doesn't necessarily represent how it actually
How it
gets
will be
used. It's
used.
so difficult to be predeterministic
Oh
about
yeah.
this. And this is why like waterfalls fail. This is why Agile kind of has a leg forward in this, because they can kind of react faster to systemic changes. But in this case, like if you build a feature that requires a certain identifier and you dictate that this is the way to get it, but then the community of thousands, if not millions of sites says that, hey, we have another way we can actually use this, then I think that as a responsible product developer, you need to roll with the punches and kind of say that, okay, hey, community, I think you're right. We need to fix this. This doesn't work like that.
This
So maybe
reminds
they will. Maybe they will. Hopefully, they will do something about it. But who knows? It's
yeah.
Google.
This reminds me of the guy that invented the sugar packets, the long sugar
Yeah,
packets, because the intended way is to use it like
from the
this in the
middle.
middle and
Yeah,
pour it, but people rip it like this and pour it.
yeah,
Some people rip it and just put two pieces in.
yeah,
It's like people are gonna use your shit as they're gonna choose to use it, and you need to be
yeah,
prepared for that. But this has to do a lot with getting that type of user intelligence in the product development cycle. So every time you go over the features or you go over the backlog, you get type of these user stories, and
yeah,
that's why you have analytics and product analytics. It's important to know how the usage is. It's not
yeah,
just like percentage of usage per day, but it's also like how are people using this? Like what problems are they
yeah,
solving? So yeah, I agree 100%.
yeah,
So we'll see. I mean, it's not gonna be the first or the last time.
yeah, yeah.
But
But it does make you wonder, like, is there such a because Google is obviously very fragmented as well. Like they have different teams for different features, and then, communication sometimes doesn't work as well as they intend. So maybe this was like an engineering decision. Like let me say first that the way they updated the cookie was very understandable. Like it was a good update. The new format is much better and it's much more future proof. And I think that we can actually add to the show notes. David Vallejo wrote a blog post where he kind of dissects the new format, and he puts out his own interpretations why Google made this change, and they're quite sound. So we'll add
that's
that to the show
cool.
notes if you want a good read about it. But so the new format is great, but it does sound like it's an engineering decision. They want the new format because they want to future proof it. They might want to add new segments to this cookie at some point. But they neglected to discuss with like the product usage people who look at how is this product being used, who could have looked at the data and checked how many server to server requests come in with the session ID, because they are almost invariably using the old cookie format. And then they might see that, okay, well, there's a risk here that we might actually break some of these flows. Um, and now, hopefully, the PMs will look at the feedback they're getting, because there's quite a lot of it, and say that, okay, maybe for the future, we'll need to actually turn this session cookie into an official way um, to access this stuff.
No, we'll see. We'll see what happens, Simo. We'll see.
Yes, as always, holding our breath as a
Mm-mm.
community.
No, let's not hold our breath.
No, yeah, it would lead to asphyxiation probably. The other thing I wanted to talk about is kind of related, but not about GA, but again about products in general. So I was, we run Simmer currently on a WordPress site, which we could have a whole another discussion about if that's smart or not, or fun or not is
I
actually
love
the right word.
WordPress, so I don't know.
Yeah, but so one of the things that kind of irks me with product development is that we use like these super popular plugins like Stripe, PayPal, Yoast, the
Mhm.
SEO stuff. And today again, like there was an update in the WordPress dashboard saying that hey, these plugins need updating, which is fine. I love it when plugins need updated because that means that there's security fixes typically which
Yeah.
are important. What I don't love, and I think that this is again a disconnect between what product developers think. I get the feeling that some product development teams think that if they create a huge update with all these crazy fixes and tweaks, it makes the community feel like, wow, they're really good at what they do. Look at all these updates they push. For me, I'm scared to push those updates live because there's
Yeah.
so many things in that one single update that if I push it live, how many things will break? So I have to go through staging and I have to go through all these different steps. Whereas if they push the updates incrementally, like 1 or 2 fixes per update, it would be much easier to roll back if something goes wrong. So my second rant for today, we haven't seen in a long time, so I'm kind of full of rants right now. But my
I'm
second
ready.
rant, yeah, you're ready for it. My second, and after this, I'll shut up. And my second rant is like, why do we need those huge updates? Like for even like minor version updates, like 4.1.1, and you have like 20 different things updated. I would expect that for 5.0.0, not for 4.1.1. So it's really bothering me, and it's especially when it comes to a system that processes money, like Stripe,
Yeah.
or something that's in charge of our entire platform, like LearnDash, which is the LMS that we use.
The LMS is very dangerous.
Yes, yeah. So
No, when I was at CXL, and every time there was, because CXL also functions
yeah,
on WordPress plus an LMS, every time there was an update, we were all like
yeah,
panicked. And there was
it
like a
is.
staging, and then you go to production and you just like pray for the best.
Yeah,
And sometimes you don't even want to update some
no,
of the
no, exactly.
because
Yeah,
some functionalities of an LMS might not work with the team update, or it doesn't
yeah,
work with the, I don't know. But when it
yeah,
comes to like payment methods, then it's very dangerous because you
yeah,
have in WordPress, like you create, like if you use WooCommerce in WordPress and you have to sell
yeah,
stuff, you have to create product, you have to
yeah,
create memberships and subscriptions and all this stuff. So everything is
yeah,
interconnected. It's back to Jenga. One
yeah,
little thing, one
yeah, and
little
almost
thing holds
yeah,
everything together.
exactly, and almost every site customizes those things. So if you're
Yeah,
using them out of the box, and if you're using only documented hooks and APIs, then you should be fine. If you're using child themes as you should, then you should be fine. But
exactly.
most sites don't do that, and understandably because they look at WordPress as a sandbox and they feel like they can. And sometimes you're frustrated with plugins. They're almost perfect, but they're missing that one little piece.
Yeah.
So you kind of patch it yourself into the code. But then when the plugin does update, then you've created a dependency that might be broken. So it's I understand that. Like my rant was more about, do product teams really feel like they are doing a service to the community by pushing out these huge updates in one go, making it look like, look at all the stuff we've achieved? Do they feel like this is actually a good idea? And why wouldn't they move to more incremental stuff with like step by step things? I think that's my kind of question that I'm going to leave floating out there.
I mean, as a product person,
Yeah.
I can say that I can say that sometimes when like this is a very real situation, and everybody that works in product probably identifies. Sometimes, or most of the times, the people that make decisions for what the product will be or what are the new releases have nothing to do with the product department, or they're not developers, they're not UX, they're not product people, they're just some stakeholders. And the stakeholders, because they have a lot of leverage inside the company, they come to the product team and says, fuck your roadmap,
Mm,
drop this, let's put something on this page, let's put some emojis.
mm,
And then because of this person having influence inside the company, you have to squeeze a lot of those stuff in the release. And maybe in the release you are focusing on the core experience or improvements or speed.
mm.
So sometimes it's not necessarily a product problem, it's a culture problem.
Yeah.
of a company. Like, how are these changes being, what's the process? It's like a process and a culture problem. And then you want to release them because you want to see your board empty and you're just like, just happy. But then they don't think about the fact that this can affect production and can affect so
Yeah.
many people. And then they have to deal with customer support chats. They have to deal with, I don't know, if you're an app, uninstalls and so on. And it's a reality that I see is that a lot of product teams have become feature factories. That's
Mhm.
it. That's all they do.
Well, you kind of understand that with WordPress because you are a plugin manufacturer. You're not unless you talk about themes or like actual editor plugins like Elementor or whatever. You're not supposed to create a core experience except for your plugin.
For your plugin, yes.
Yeah, but still, like it's kind of understandable. But in that case specifically, I would hope that they understand that they are supposed to be a feature factory only. Like I can understand the frustration of plugin development from the point of view that we've created this amazing plugin,
Yeah.
but it doesn't define the actual site experience. That is defined by the theme and the other plugins. So what we could do, the best that we can do is create this added value to this core experience, but there's no way for us to guarantee that it works. Like we
Yeah.
can only guarantee that our plugin works, and we can offer documentation. But who in the world can say reliably, let's say I have 150 plugins. We don't, but let's say I would have, with various stages of interoperability. And now one of them comes in with a huge update with all these different fixes and tweaks and comments. How on earth am I supposed to reliably test the, hundreds of thousands of permutations that result from updating one plugin that might be connected with all these others? Like I don't envy the product team's position here, but if they were to push incremental updates, it would be much, let's say that the downsides would be easier to bear. Like it would be easier to roll back quickly than to have to worry about all this stuff that is already completely mixed up together. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
100%. And when you're in the WordPress environment and you're in a plugin marketplace, you also have to think about the interdependencies,
yeah,
because as a product team, you should have analytics on what are the most popular combinations of your plugin with other plugins. Like,
yeah,
you have to be
for
conscious
sure.
of stuff, and you need to make decisions based on
Yeah,
these things, especially for WooCommerce and payment methods. Come on,
yeah,
right? Or LLMs plus certificates plus all the gamification thing that you want to give during the course.
yeah,
Like, it's the certification. People don't understand how hard it is to run a learning management system,
mm,
certifications that's also connected to subscriptions and memberships
yeah,
and connected to a purchase. Like, this was my job like years ago when I was at CXL, and it was a nightmare every time I was having to like edit something and I had to go in the membership and make sure that the stuff is attached to the
yeah,
specific course. It's a problem that I know. But yeah, product teams for sure should focus more on this incremental and releases, but also think about the interdependency of
yeah,
especially in the plugin context. It's a very interesting market.
yeah. Yeah, like for just another example, like our technical marketing handbook site, there's an update that's been waiting, a plugin update that's been waiting for months now for us
Yeah,
to implement. We can't do it because there's a known conflict with another plugin, and if we were to update it, that other plugin would break.
not gonna
And
work.
this team that produces this plugin that we refuse to update now, they've recognized the problem and they've said that okay, we found where the problem is, but we have no roadmap for the fix. So now we have a really important plugin because this plugin that we can't update is actually the plugin that handles the entire site editor.
Oh man.
So we can't update that until they fix this dependency, which they have already recognized. But they're a huge company, so I understand that they can't just push something because it's a very rare combination. So I understand that they can't prioritize it, but it just goes to show how like the WordPress is amazing when it's done right, and when you have all the things coming in together. Like the things you can do with it are crazy good. Of course, there are performance and security concerns, as with any other CMS, but it's things like these that are a bit jarring because you
Agreed.
are beholden to these plugin manufacturers, which can be like multi-million-dollar companies in themselves, just building plugins.
Yeah.
And it's understandable that they can't just jump your request to the front of the queue. But I am kind of wondering how many releases does it take for them to actually address this thing that they already know about and probably know how to fix.
And also on WordPress, you can easily go to the point of no return very fast, because a lot of
Yeah.
people might be like, oh, just, migrate to another platform. It's not that easy.
Yeah.
The more time you
Listen.
spend on WordPress and you build the business on WordPress, the harder it is to move. You
Yeah.
have to, poof. I can't even. Okay. Cool. We have a guest today. We're going to talk about attribution, something that
Completely unrelated to our intro
yes,
discussion.
we're going to talk about attribution today. Not my forte, so I had to actually do a bit of research. Barbara is really amazing. She's doing a lot of courses and master classes about attribution. So we're going to talk about MTAs. We're going to talk about MMMs. We're going to talk about what the fuck is attribution and how are we doing it these days. But like for the last 2 minutes, Simo, I just want to put my rant out, because like my frustration lately is with people coming up on social media and talking about stuff that they don't understand. And I said,
No, that's never happened.
listen, I said yesterday, and I still want to keep this. I just want to say this out loud. So the best and the worst part about the fact that LLMs are accessible and you can go into Google Sheets and connect it with GCP and LP, and then you can go to Claude and write some code and put it in the app script to write 10 shitty LinkedIn posts or to do summarization and to do sentiment. That's great. But at the same time, nobody's doing F1 scoring and precision and recall, and those results are fake. So just because you can do stuff doesn't mean you understand. So I don't have time to rant, but I will leave you guys with what Richard Feynman says. Just because you know the name of something doesn't mean you know that something. And let's have Barbara. And in the next episode, I promise I'm gonna do my rant.
Yeah,
my
we'll get back to
LLM
it. This was my rant episode, and we'll go up. It's
fine.
going to be your rant next time, I promise.
Yes, and I'm gonna rant about a lot of shit regarding
Good.
the LLMs. Okay. Yeah, this backfired. Hello, Barbara. Hey.
Hi.
Hold up.
You need to reduce the delay on that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just before we
I gave you the soundboard rights. You have to accept responsibility now.
Okay, I will do it again.
No, I was just kidding.
Okay. But I wanna say before we oh, it doesn't stop.
This is very long.
I'm sorry. Okay.
They're very excited to have me here.
I am very excited to have you here. And
Yes.
I want to say I'm sorry, because before we started recording, you know what, guys, like sometimes I don't know. I just I think I have social skills, very bad social skills. But I want to say that we're here with Barbara Galiza. Barbara, thank you so much for coming. The reason why we wanted to have you is because you're the only voice that I know of that is so, I guess, determined to explain how attribution and MTAs and MMM works. And I think what I like about it is that you don't go into that very technical abstract layer, but you actually explain how stuff works from a business perspective. And for somebody like me that this is not my field, it's very comforting to read your newsletter, 021 newsletter. So we have a lot of stuff to talk about today, but I was thinking about starting hot and with Simo and you, and get you go ahead.
Can I just say that you said that it's not your field, but as practitioners in marketing analytics, we are kind of in the smack in the middle of it, whether we like it or not, or whether we know about it or not. I think that's kind of the reality of things.
I know, but these guys are way smarter than me. Like I don't understand I don't know econometrics. For me, this is where it's like, okay. So I wanted to start with like a very simple question. Does server-side tagging impact attribution in any way? Does it improve it? Because a lot of people are posting LinkedIn about this. What's the difference? Because some people, Timo, says there's no difference. So I wanna let you guys discuss this.
Yeah, no, Timo hates server-side attribution. So if we play around this, sometimes we should do just like a podcast for just arguing with each other about it. But, I think like there is a risk of saying, improving or decreasing the quality of attribution, because different methods of attribution are measuring different things, and server side is just measuring things differently from client side. So what you can have with server side, and I think the main difference is whether or not you're passing PII.
Yeah.
You can also do that via the client, but a lot of the times you don't have time to enrich the data when you're gathering that event on the client. When you're storing that on the server, you have more control and more capabilities of enriching the conversion data and passing things like business emails, personal emails, company name, country, all of that. And that can really, increase the amount of data signals you're sending to the ad platform. So, in the case of like Meta, and you see that a lot with social, if you only have client side and you're not passing PII, in a lot of the cases, you're losing the connection between the click and the conversion, right? Because the user will click on an ad, with an app in Instagram on Meta, and perhaps they go on to convert on desktop, or perhaps they go on to convert, even within their phones, but in another browser. And then if you're only using, the click ID UTMs to measure via the client, like this is not a journey that you're going to be able to stitch together. So when you have server side and you pass, email, name, campaign, all of these fields that you have available, it could be that Meta is then able to see, okay, this person did click on the ads, and then later on 5 days they converted. So we can we can attribute this conversion to the campaign. Does it mean that the user converted because they saw the campaign? No, but it means that Meta is able to make this connection and therefore, have a better idea of who to serve the ads to.
Do you think that this rise of like Meta's conversion API, and then it has analogies with LinkedIn and TikTok and Pinterest, they all have similar systems these days, and Google as well. Do you think it came as a genuine attempt to get better data, like cross-device data, for example, or as a direct response to the deprecation of third-party cookies? Because that was kind of the previous way of getting cross-device or cross-site tracking. And it feels like as soon as third-party cookies were the deprecation kind of amped up, all of these new efforts to get the traffic to flow through server-side increased. So do you see that correlation?
Yeah, I see the correlation with all of that, and also with ATT. Like mobile install attribution broke completely. When Apple only started passing in the IDFA, with consent. So like these and you saw it too happening. Like post ATT, how Meta advertising really went down. They started, selling less ads. And you could see, I work with advertisers, I work in the marketing side, and a lot of the budget, for mobile and for install campaigns that would previously go to Meta started going to Apple search ads. So, your Meta, you're looking into, okay, how can we both show results to the advertiser they're spending money on the platform that people are indeed converting? Because if you were doing client side, you were seeing a handful of conversions, you were looking at very high CPAs. And also along that, how can we make sure that our targeting keeps improving, so that, as an ad platform, we're able to see, this ad should be served to these people because these are the most likely to convert. So I think, all of these changes, with ATT, with privacy changes, with this cloud of depreciation of cookies, it all kickstarted these ad platforms to really search for other ways to attribute. And now Meta is even testing like incremental conversions. I haven't tested it myself, but you can see that they're moving into this direction, and I think that's the best direction to move towards.
And is there a corresponding effort from vendors, like in addition to expecting like these new identifiers like email addresses? And I think that fingerprints are also still very very popular as kind of new ways to identify, especially cross-site. But how much do these platforms then also put more effort into modeling to kind of understand those gaps from the point of view that, okay, we have these gaps and they're never going to be filled because of loss of cookies and MTT and consent and everything. So do you see that there's also a ramp up in like black box models where the vendor says that, hey, just send us information and we'll fill in the gaps for you and then give you these reports that show what a good job we've been doing?
Yeah, you also always have that too. Like for example, you see with like Google Ads that you're not able to select first click attribution anymore. The default attribution in Google Ads is this data-driven attribution model that you can't audit, you can't troubleshoot, you can't understand like, who is getting, what campaign is getting the conversion and for what. So, and then you have things like Performance Max that, then you have alongside a black box attribution model, you have a black box, what is running in the first place? I don't know, who knows? So it's definitely, moving towards that. So I think it's important that, us marketers always remember, what's the interest of these ad platforms. They want to show results and they want us to, increase the budgets that we have there. And, our incentives are not necessarily aligned. So it's important that, we, put guardrails, and that is, using other attribution models. It is, running incrementality tests. It's, it's trying to understand what's really happening. So we're not in a situation where, a brand spends 200,000 a month on Performance Max, and then later they find out, they're just buying brand search.
Yeah, but there's so many
that
ways.
happens.
But there's so many ways. You have incrementality, you have MMM, you have MTAs, you have self-reported attribution, zero-party stuff. Like, how can somebody decide on this method? Like, what's because some of them, not some, most of the times, all these ways of measuring attribution are contradicting each other. Like, you're not gonna get the same answer out of everything. So like, if you're a business owner, how do you decide what are you gonna use? How are you gonna make decisions?
Yeah, no, of course. I think similar to the client side and server side, it's not necessarily, that one is better than the other. Is that they're all measuring different things with different methodologies.
Yeah.
So it's so important that we understand how each one of these measures. And that's something that, we cover a lot in the Attribution Masterclass with Timo. And I always, I think a lot of marketers they see like attribution as the end goal. Like, I want to have good attribution. And that is not the way that I would recommend looking at it. What you have is different business problems. You're trying to understand, okay, we're running 4 channels. How much budget should we allocate to each channel? That's a business question. And then you will find, a measurement framework, an attribution model that can help you with that question. And, for certain brands, depending on channel mix, depending on budget side, that could be like MMM. And then you have like other questions, like I'm running search. What markets do I run in? What keywords do I invest in? And then you have another way of measurement. You're not going to use MMM for that. So it's important that, and that's also always something that, I work with clients is, like, let's try to forget the search for these holy grails. Like, we love holy grails in data, like, I want to have great attribution. I want to have a one source of truth. We're always searching for these like utopias, but let's just take a step back and go through, what are the marketing and the business questions we need to answer? And then we'll define, ways of measurement and methodology for each one of them. So that we're not like getting into these discussions like, for search, MMM says this and MTA says that.
So there's no one size fits all model. But how much, like Juliana described, there's all these different things swirling around you and trying to vie for your attention. How do you, as a company that wants to do a good job and understand the results and know where to put your budget, like, how do you get started? How much education do you need, or do you just need to hire someone who knows their stuff? Like, where do you start?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I would say that you often need someone who knows the stuff. I don't know how you can get around that, especially with data. I did this article recently for my newsletter. It was talking about, data points that, you should take with a grain of salt, because
Mm.
I think we have a tendency of, just reading the metric and then thinking like, oh, I know what this is. Like,
Mm.
oh, unique users. These are just unique people. But, like all of these metrics measure in a different way. And we need to
Yeah.
understand like what they're measuring. And we can't make decisions on these metrics without knowing how they're calculated. So that is very important. So like for clients, I always like to think of attribution from a strategy perspective. Like and you've sent me some questions before, and one of the questions was, like regarding like measuring podcasts.
Yeah, yeah,
You can't expect to measure a podcast on the same way that you're
Mm.
measuring a paid search campaign.
yeah.
They're going to reach users at different devices, a different level of attention, different stages in the user journey, different expectations on what they expect when they're within the channel. So using the same way of measurement for these two channels, is not going to work.
Yeah.
So before you launch something new, the marketing, needs to take a step back and be like, what do we expect the user experience to be like? And then how can we measure that user experience in a way that is fair to the channel?
Because it's not outcome based. That's the problem with our industry and with all the decisions that surround data. It's not outcome based. It's just very, very much people plan for metrics, but they're not
Mm-hmm.
planning what are they gonna do with those metrics afterwards. Like, I want to track sales from Facebook. I want to track email
Yeah.
lead generation. Okay, and you track it and you look at the number, but you don't plan for what are you gonna do after. And Chris Mercer, Simo, Chris. Chris
Mm.
Mercer had this amazing framework called the KIA model: question, information, and action. So basically, he said every time you want to track something or measure or do attribution, you have to have a business question that you can answer
Mm-hmm.
with data. And then you have to ask yourself, where are you currently getting that information from? How are you
Mm-hmm.
currently measuring that? And then the action. So, what are you going to do when you have that information? And if you cannot answer all these questions, it's been that's not a good metric for you.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to the podcasting. The reason
and
why I
and then and then I also want, just
yeah,
before we get back to the podcast, I often like, as anyone that works with marketing data, they're always asked to build some type of report,
yes. Yes.
like a dashboard of some sort, and then I often like to say like, okay, like, you want this report, let's say this is 100 here, this is 200 here, and this is 50. What do you do with this data? And then often they'll be like, oh, I don't know, I would need to then look into this and that. And I'm like, then this report is not going to tell you what you need. So I think it's great to, take whoever's working from with data, marketing or sales, take them through, like some made up data, and then help them connect the dots on
Mm.
what is
It's a
it
good idea.
that they really want.
I love this, and it's true. It's like reports and dashboards is where data goes to die. Like,
Yeah.
I genuinely appreciate only when developers use dashboards and reports to look at crash data, at usability, the crash analytics and performance,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
those guys
yeah.
actually are the small percentage of the industry that actually use data to make decisions, because they look at the crashes. Oh, we need to fix this bug. Like, people don't think about that. But I will say that the reason why I had the podcast question is because in B2B marketing, as you
Mm-hmm.
guys both know, podcasts are a huge channel in their
Mm-hmm.
mind. It's a huge channel for lead gen. It's a huge channel for awareness. And I have a friend that used to work for a company. He's not there anymore, so that's why I cannot name names. But basically, his metric was leads from podcasts, and he was always super frustrated with me. It's like, how can I quantify this? Like, it's not easy to quantify. It's very, and also, like, how do you identify the people that listen to your podcast? Because I have podcast analytics, and I always like to check our data, and I'm happy, but I don't know who the fuck these people are. How can I use this information to, I don't know, do better episodes? Clearly I'm not using any information. But yeah, Like that's the reason. Like, can we talk a bit more about these channels for B2B marketing, like podcasts, like social media, like LinkedIn, like whatever? Like, what methods are you gonna use to inform your budget allocation and decision making?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, things like paid social or, YouTube, at least with ads, it's also a lot easier because you can control the targeting. And when you're able to control the targeting, you know, with a retargeting campaign or with specific geos, it's a lot easier to quantify the impact that that campaign has had. Maybe you're not going to go all the way and connected to leads, but at least you'll be able to see, like, organic traffic, visits to the site. You're able to connect with these different metrics. But then when you do something like a podcast, you don't, this is going to be listened in multiple countries. You don't know where. It's going to be listened on multiple devices. Again, you don't have control over that. So then you have to be like a lot more, creative. If you spend a lot on podcasts, it could show up in MMM, but podcast is usually, like a small budget, so it's not going to show. And then I come back to, the user journey. What does someone listening a podcast, what do they expect to get, and what do you expect the user journey to be? So if you're a brand and you want to measure podcasts more efficiently, is there something that you can offer within the podcast that will help you connect this journey better? For example, a specific offer, a dedicated offer to the podcast, and then the landing page. Can be something that, then someone will search for it, especially if there's like a discount or a voucher, and then they can go on to use that voucher or go on the landing page, and then you're able to connect that journey. Or, is there a certain asset that you can offer to the podcast listeners that will also enable you to measure this journey? Maybe, let's say that, for this call here, we create a checklist of the things you should check regarding your attribution. And then, the listeners that are interested in learning more about it, they can download this from, like a certain page. Then you can also, like gather their emails and then later on try to make this connection. But as we'll probably see,
Test this. We need to test this, Simo. So this podcast is sponsored by Simmer.
yeah.
We need a 1-800 number that someone calls, and then we'll know that we had a deal. We had a lead from this.
I mean, we have
podcast.
the deviate code, so you can use that if you're
But
listening.
I give that to anyone anyway, so it's not linked
You're
to this
ruining
podcast
our
anymore.
attribution.
I know I am. I've messed it up, but it's been going for so many years.
But people are using it, so that's good. So we have some sort of. I mean, this podcast is sponsored by Seymour. And if you go on teamseymour.com and use the coupon code DEVIATE, you can get 10% off on individual course purchases, because we forgot to do this earlier. So
we did forget to do that. This is how well we manage our attribution.
But yes, last question here. Because this is so hard, and it's mostly, I like to call this data, and people hate me when I do this. This is directional data. And I feel like everybody, when they use the directional attribute for data, is like you don't know exactly if it's true or not, but it's
a cop-out.
It's a cop out. Exactly. I use this. I'm sorry, and if you're working with me and you heard this, I'm sorry, but it's true. Like, how do you convince finance to release funds then, right? Like, how do you go to finance and say, I got 20,000 downloads, but I need more money, Simo, so I can do this and this and that. Like, what narrative do I have? How do I convince people?
Yeah, and that's always the challenge. One, I think it comes back to education. I've seen, plenty of finance teams that only believed in MTA. They really believed that was a source of truth, and then that led to, like paid search have totally inflated budgets because of that. And it is about proving value little by little. Also, I think, like a small, like incremental test that shows. But the reality is, the more you spend and the more you scale, it becomes more and more difficult to isolate all these activities too.
And
so
yeah.
Yeah, no, sorry, go on.
No, I just wanted to piggyback on that. kind of bringing us back to the vendor reports and their attribution models and black boxes. So in general, like when a vendor tells me that this is your, this is your CPA, these are your metrics, this is based on our data-driven algorithm, how do I audit that? How do I know that it's just not self-preferential? Like they can say whatever they like to get me to up my budget. And as long as they're using words like data-driven or modeling or something like that, and they're not revealing their variables and their tuning system, I just have to trust them. And if I do incremental tests, which I think, I from what I understand, is one way to kind of test this, to do small changes and see the impact, is it guaranteed that the result of that incremental test can be scaled when I no longer do incremental tests? Like when I put my whole budget there and see, can I trust the result of the incrementality test to kind of qualify this entire campaign that I'm running? So my problem with current, well, I have many problems with ad tech vendors, but one of them is this kind of, they are reporting on their own success without giving us tools to validate their reports. And are people fine with that in general? Like, do they accept this, or do they not think about this?
I think a lot of people are fine, and that is crazy.
Exactly.
I think it's crazy, now that everyone is moving on to MMM, they're like, oh, who has an MMM model? Google. Let's use that one. Or, let's use Facebook's MMM model. Let, Facebook tell me, how did my Facebook campaigns perform? I find it insane. But yeah, people do it. Like, what I recommend to clients, is ad platform tracking is not for reporting. Ad platform tracking is for improving campaign performance. You're really trying to increase the number of conversions that are attributed within an ad platform, so they have as many signals as possible to understand who converts. So I like to enrich as much as possible. If you can pass predicted values, great, so you can tell them who are the most valuable users to reach. If we can stretch the look back window or use offline conversions, so we're able to do some user stitching ourselves to send more conversions, great. These are all things that we can work on, but we shouldn't be using these data points as a way to assess if the campaign is working. And incrementality is a predictive model, right? Because you're looking at a sample data set. And usually, the methodology of an incrementality model is based on a geo lift test. So you're going to go, okay, I've been running paid search campaigns for 6 months, and now I'm going to cut them in a location of markets, and then I'm going to see what impact what impact it has on overall sales, or if sales don't occur often enough for a business, what impact does it have on leads or on website visitors and all of that. And then I'm going to calculate what I expect incrementality to be based on that. And that is, a valuable signal to have that you can use to understand the impact. But none of this is going to have, 100% accuracy. Like how could it have, like if I purchase something, like when you purchase something, there are just so many things they're influencing like that decision. That data point that we are able to attribute to one touch point, or accurately to a group of touch points, is just not feasible. So we're just trying to get the best signals we can get to make the best decisions we can, in a way that allows us to keep testing new channels and keep launching new campaigns with confidence that we're moving roughly in the right direction.
But you wrote in your newsletter, which again, it's go in the episode notes and check it out ASAP, because I learned so much from you. You wrote in the newsletter that let's say you're a marketing analyst, you just got hired by a company, and you inherit a stack of like 50 tools, and then you got your manager that says, I need attribution, I need to know how we're performing, please, and like what's your advice? Like, what can you do to get to business outcomes? Like, how do you deal with this stack? How do you deal with the business questions? Like, how can you even realistically answer? to the attribution
Yeah,
system.
yeah, like that is a very difficult one. You
Yeah.
know, I have like a standard service that I offer to clients, which is like a marketing analytics measurement audit that is like a 3 month service where I always start like understanding what campaigns are running, what campaigns do the marketers want to run, and then going through what data do we need for those campaigns. And like we've talked about here, that will usually be different sources of truth. So I'll go like, okay, for paid search, we're going to be using like MTA. For social, we want to have server side, so we increase the attributed conversions, but we also want to be able to run incremental tests. So I'll prepare all of that, and then I will try. My goal is to create like a streamlined as possible plan that has a minimal number of sources of truth, where each source of truth has a goal, that we're able to connect the dots and do more connection across sources than like multiple sources tracking the same thing. But there are some teams that you want to have all of these tools, and it's extremely difficult to educate it tool. And then you have like all these tools, and then they always believe the tool that's tracking the most conversions. There's always the one that's right,
Understandable.
and the other ones are broken.
Yes.
And then you're stuck into this discrepancy investigation flow, where they're like, this tool is telling me 100, and all the other ones are broken because they're telling me that 60, and you're saying like, maybe the 100 one is broken. But that's not something I know that they want to hear. And yeah, sometimes there's some clients that, yeah, you can't get them to. You can get them to. At least there's clients that I failed to teach them that. I failed to teach that these sources are measuring different things, that discrepancy exists, that there's not going to be a one size fits all. So I have a service, I try to tackle it. Some clients get it, some clients don't get it.
This reminds me of something Simo said a while back, because people were complaining about the differences between GA and amplitude and BigQuery and whatever. And he was, I don't know if you remember, you said the Simo, but you said that it's okay for the data to be different because it's different data sources, but it has to be consistently different. Like,
Yeah.
it's consistency is the metric you're
Yeah.
looking for. Consistency, not the difference. And I've been quoting you on that for a long
But
time.
you need to be able to calibrate. Like you need to be able to say that this is a predictable difference, and then you can apply that. But this choosing, this was it was a funny anecdote that people choose the platform that gives them the best conversions, but it's not
Yeah.
it's not that it's not uncommon. Like, for example, when Universal Analytics back in the day, they introduced attribution modeling, and they had like first touch, last touch, or first click, last click, and they had time decay and linear and whatever. It became a fun game with clients to just pick the one that gave them the best results without considering what it's actually telling them.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you try to insert some kind of an expert opinion in between and saying that you have to kind of adapt this to what you look at the user journey, like, does first touch actually make any sense in how you are buying these ads, or what they are conveying? It became an incredibly difficult discussion, because they just wanted to take the one that shows the best uplift. And
Mm-hmm.
here, this is one platform, how it internally works. And now when you combine this with a dozen other platforms that all have this internal struggle, and then their codependency struggle, and then their interactions with your overall marketing approach, which goes beyond just digital and tech, to offline and to point of sale systems, like, like, what is the future here? Like, is there going to be, is AI going to solve this somehow? Are there going to be agents that do all this for you? They look at the data, then they improve the budgets, they allocate them differently, and you don't. Is there a single platform in the future that's going to handle everything? Like, it's overwhelming.
Or UTMs plus surveys and regressions.
Yeah, or do we just go back to treating each platform separately and just hoping for the best and not looking at how they interact with each other?
Yeah, there's a lot of vendors coming up right now trying to solve attribution with
Mm.
AI. And I think we have to remember that a lot of attribution is not new. It's not
Mm.
even, like digital. If you,
Yeah, exactly.
one of the first, my favorite things I always like to mention is, if you read like, Claude Hopkins, and he's written like, scientific advertising, my life in advertising in the 1920s. So 100 years ago. And he's talking about concepts like vouchers, geolift
Yeah.
tests, surveys, and how to measure that to measure marketing results. I was actually just reading like this week the classic, I'm going to butcher his name, in Ogilvy. I don't know, David Ogilvy, the advertising,
Yeah.
genius. And then from 83, and then he's talking about incrementality tests and how advertisers don't want to run incrementality tests because they don't want to learn the real result. And this was, like 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So a lot of these, concepts that we like to think are new have existed for, a very, very long time.
Yeah.
So where can AI help? I'm not sure. I think, like measurement will always be a competitive advantage, because if you're able to measure, channels that are difficult to measure, then you can find, initiatives that competitors could be overlooking, and that can really, increase efficiency and distribution of a product. I think that, obviously AI, I think, will help a lot with analysis. But if I had to, I think, summarize what I think it will make the biggest difference is enabling the people that are closest to the business results to do the analytics themselves. And that can be for, like building landing pages, like we were talking about. If you're able to build a landing page for every podcast that you're sponsoring, and then also have a custom offer and a custom voucher there, and the marketer is able to do all of that themselves, they will do it. It's not that they don't want to do it. It's just usually it's blocked by products or design or something else. I think like, yeah, pixel analysis, I'm nowhere as close as a technical marketer as Simo, but it's, I do a lot now where, yeah, I'm using, Chrome, the network, to get the log, and then I can just download the log and put it in ChatGPT and ask questions to it. That saves me a lot of time on troubleshooting tags. So I think, kind of like how, DBT and this whole data engineering movement helped put the analysis in the hands of the domain experts. I think AI is going to help marketers to do a lot of these measurement initiatives that they were previously blocked by the engineering team or the design team. Yeah. But I think at its core, what measurement is not that different from what it was 140 years ago,
Yeah. And at the very least, these chat companions will help marketers understand the complexity if they ask the right questions, like,
Exactly.
why am I seeing these results? Well, because there are these million different systems competing for attribution here.
And
you
also,
just need to know
LLMs
to ask the question.
And
Yeah,
LLMs
exactly.
are bad with numbers. LLMs are still bad with numbers. Very bad. Very, very bad. And painfully bad.
Yeah, I wouldn't ask them to,
people use it for
2 plus 2.
analysis.
I wouldn't ask them for that, but I would ask them, like, why do I need to count 2 plus 2? Like, what is the purpose of this exercise? Yeah.
Still like classic good statistical calculations are still the best ones that you can use for anything.
Yeah.
Barbara, thank you so much for coming today. Please
thank you.
Tell everybody how they can go and sign up for your attribution masterclass, because like I think you got everybody now excited about this. Like, how can people go and take your course?
Yeah, so Timo De Chao and I organize an attribution course. We do, free cohorts, like once a quarter, once every 2 quarters. And then we also have, like a more complete version that is for purchasing. We can create a voucher for you guys.
Let's test it.
For standard deviation, so I can share that later. So
and
people
then I'll
can
just
also
share it again for everyone who didn't even listen to the podcast now, ruin everything.
Exactly.
That
You're
is-
gonna ruin the attribution again.
I did. I'm attribution ruiner. That's my new title on LinkedIn.
And where can people connect with you, follow you? Please tell them about your gorgeous newsletter.
Yeah, so I have a newsletter too where I write about everything that's in the intersection between marketing and data. So that's zerochuannewsletter.com. And then I also work as a consultant with all things between marketing and data. I started my career in growth, so everything comes from a growth first perspective. And I've been working as a freelancer for 10 years. Next year might have a party. And you can connect to me on LinkedIn, Barbara Galiza. And I'm looking forward to
I'll make sure to
connecting.
add all those in the episode notes. And again, thank you so much for coming. This was a
Thank you so
very
much.
refreshing
Yeah.
conversation. I think we need to have you again. This was really good. This was we need this. We need this. Well, thanks everybody for listening. I see you all next time.